Today, I would like to talk to you about one of the most important, if not the most important, and for sure the happiest day of my life. That would be my wedding, when I got to marry my wife, Amanda. It was 1 year in the making. We got engaged 1 year in advance of our wedding and spent a good chunk of our time leading up to that point preparing for the wedding. What I want to tell you about is what kind of work we put into wedding planning. What I don't want to overshadow, though, is the importance that we put on marriage preparation over wedding preparation. Marriage preparation was a lot more important to us than our wedding preparation. The wedding is just one day. It will come and it will go. We knew that. However, we wanted to be married for the rest of our lives, and we knew that the best way that we could have a happy marriage that would be successful, a marriage where we could grow old together, we needed to put a lot of emphasis on marriage prep. You heard me talk about our marriage prep in episode 1 of this podcast, where we discussed intentionality. When it came to the wedding, though, weddings are expensive. If you have not paid for a wedding before, you will be shocked to know that there is a wedding tax and everything. Like, you could go to a florist and buy the same bouquet of flowers, but if they know it's for a wedding, it's probably going to all of a sudden become more expensive. There are legitimate reasons for why things for a wedding cost more. A wedding is an incredibly important day to the bride and groom. And because it's such an important day, there's a major emphasis on getting it right and getting it on time. And mistakes, errors, or meh work just falls short of expectations. It was very important for us to discuss what was important, what was very important, and what wasn't important at all. If we didn't know what mattered, we wouldn't know what we should spend a lot of money on, what we should spend as little money on as possible, and what should be omitted entirely. One of the major factors when it came to planning our wedding was the size of the wedding. A wedding can often be equated to a cost per head, especially when it comes to your catering and your venue. Other things like decorations also scale with how many guests you're going to have with your wedding. Smaller weddings, you're going to be able to be a little bit more fancy on the same budget, as opposed to a larger wedding where you're going to have to go with more budget-friendly options. The number of people we invited to our wedding was incredibly important to us. We went through an exercise where we listed everyone we possibly wanted to invite to the wedding. I think the list exceeded over 700 or 800 people. We looked at options roughly and realized that that was just not practical, and there wasn't a venue in the city where we were going to be married that could accommodate that many people all at once. We looked at venues and picked the largest one we could, figured that they could accommodate at most 300 people, and invited about 420 people as a result. We had to cut our list almost in half, and we also had to invite more people than the venue could cover in order to fill the venue as much as we could. There were a lot of statistics online that I looked up that said that a certain percentage of guests, when it's local to the area with the family, will show up typically. I ran a statistics model that said we are 99% confident that we aren't going to fill the venue. We had 250 people RSVP yes. So we definitely fell under that 300 mark. That was great. With the venue picked and the number of guests picked, we were then able to move into figuring out the decorations. Now, the venue we picked provided a lot of decorations. We went through all of the decorations that they historically had used for weddings. We picked out what we liked, we picked out what we didn't like, and we prioritized making our decorations work around what the venue was offering for free. By maximizing the number of decorations and theming them together in a way that we liked, we're able to minimize the expense for the type of decoration that we'd have to supplement with. The bulk of the decoration that the venue provided was tablecloths and vases, different containers for like plants or candles that float in water. One other thing that was really important to us that impacted the venue and the layout of the reception was going to be making sure there was enough space for the Grand March. The Grand March is a tradition that's incredibly common in the Midwest. If you don't know what that is, in my wife's family, her mom and dad are typically asked to lead the Grand March. There are a chain of people. There's like one side that's boys, one side that's girls, and my wife's father, my father-in-law, leads the boys half, and my mother-in-law leads the girls half. And they march around the room, boys and girls locked arm in arm. Then they split off and they march around in some funky pattern from above. And then they relink up. In the end, they end up going in a big circle, and the bride and groom get pushed into the middle of the circle. Following them being pushed into the middle of the circle, everyone stops marching around, starts clapping, and the first dance begins. It's a beautiful tradition. It wasn't something I was familiar with, but it was very important for her. Lucky for both of us, I am an architectural engineer who worked on floor plans for hospitals and hotels and alike, and had the ability to draw out a plan and lay out the tables and chairs, the dance floor, the head table, decorations and alike, and figure out the most optimal way to set up the reception hall with as many people as possible, but still have ample room for the Grand March to go wherever my future mother and father-in-law wanted the Grand March to go. This enabled us to provide very specific, detailed directions for the decorations and the layout of the room to the hospital staff without having to hire a planner to lay it out. We leaned on my talents and skills and leveraged them in order to spend less money, but still capitalize on what mattered most to us for the wedding celebration. Another talent that I was able to lean into is graphic design. I really enjoyed tinkering with Photoshop. How and why I got into graphic design is a story for another time. But I was able to design our save the dates, our wedding invites, and the programs for the ceremony and the reception. I printed the bulk of it, but I did have the actual invitations professionally printed. We got quotes from multiple cities, the city where I was living, the city where my wife was living, and the city where we were going to be married. And we took the lowest of the quotes and figured out the logistics from there. That was able to save us about 50% on the overall cost for all of the stationery that went to the wedding. Another part of the wedding that was very important to my wife was the dress. I don't know a single wedding where the bride doesn't care about the dress. The dress is important. She wanted to wear her mom's dress. Now, her mom's dress was from the 80s and it had poofy sleeves. Fortunately for us, her mom is a very talented seamstress and was able to refresh the dress and adjust it for her daughter, for my wife. And it was beautiful, and it saved us a lot of money on what we would otherwise be spending on a dress while having an awful lot of meaning and personal touch put into the wedding. I didn't have the same blessing when it came to the tuxedo that I was going to wear. However, I had a colleague who used to sell suits and tuxedos for a living before he became employed as a recruiter at our current office. Because of this, I was able to talk to him and say, "Hey, I've got a wedding coming up." And he's like, "Well, I've got spare tuxedos. Would you like to buy one?" And he was able to get me an excellent deal on that tuxedo, and it fit perfectly. I was really, really happy with how that went. And because I bought it, I got to keep it, just like my wife got to keep her dress. I did have the groomsmen, because they were sort of scattered, order rental suits that matched themselves from an online service that was very economical and guaranteed shipping things on time. When it came to wedding vendors like the DJ and the baker for the wedding cake and the photographer and the videographer, we interviewed each of the vendors and we interviewed multiple options for each vendor so that we could get price quotes and understand the different wedding packages that could be provided as options to us. When it came to the photographers and the videographers, there were some whom we interviewed who would be paid to come and take the pictures and take the videos, but you had to pay for the digital files and prints separately in addition to that after the fact. So while they will capture the event, the pictures that you actually get were going to individually cost more, and you would have to go through a series of steps to pick the ones that you did or didn't like. Also, those that you picked and the editing that goes into cleaning them up would be an additional charge. The videographer and photographer whom we picked offered all of the product that came out of their work without additional costs. So you knew what you were buying up front. That saved us an awful lot on capturing and holding on to the memories that we wanted to for the event. One thing that we compromised on with the videographer was the length of time in which they would stick around and record videos. We ended up having them leave the reception before the reception ended in order to capture as much of the reception that was important for us to look back on, but not necessarily stick around and get a whole lot of partying as the wedding reception may fizzle out for an additional $200 or $300. We figured we could save that money and apply it to something else that mattered more. We did do the video, but we didn't do it with everything that we possibly could have wanted. We had to limit ourselves to what mattered most. Lastly, it's very common for weddings to be planned by professional wedding planners. A professional wedding planner makes sure that everything is scheduled, all of the vendors are organized, and that the day is sorted in such a way that you can stay on schedule so that you, the bride or the groom, don't have to worry about how the day is going to be sequenced, how the schedule is going. You just get to be and go with the flow and enjoy the big day. My wife and I, after talking, decided that we didn't want somebody to be planning out all the steps of the day. For us, it was going to be less stressful if we knew every single step of the day, that we were watching the calendar, and that we knew what we could expect. And if something went awry, we could say, okay, well, this is what we need to cut out, or this is what we need to move, because this is what's important to us. We knew our schedule inside and out for both the reception and the ceremony. And the day as a whole, we had multiple spreadsheet Gantt charts. By the time we were done planning, by the time we were done making decorations and sending out invitations, our planning documents, this does include engagement photos that my father took and that were taken by a professional photographer, all of those files together were just shy of 40 gigabytes. We made an extensive effort to plan our wedding. We did have a full year to put it all together, but the result was we spent only half of what the average wedding costs in 2019 for a wedding that was above average in size. And everything went smoothly. We couldn't have asked for a better day. We were so happy with how it turned out, and we really got the most bang for our buck every single step of the way.